When a cocky comedian tried to humiliate Steve Harvey, he instantly regretted it in a way that would haunt his career forever. In the cutthroat world of comedy, some rising stars will do anything for fame, even if it means tearing down legends to build themselves up. For this comedian, Steve Harvey seemed like the perfect target. A household name, a comedy giant, an opportunity too tempting to resist. But when you come for the king, you better not miss. What happened next would not only silence a room of hundreds, but would send shockwaves through the entire comedy industry. Jake Donovan was the talk of the comedy circuit. With his razor-sharp wit and fearless approach, he'd climbed from open mics to sold-out clubs in just 3 years. Critics called him refreshingly ruthless, a title he wore like a badge of honor. At 32, with his perfectly styled hair and designer stubble, Jake had cultivated an image that screamed success, even before he truly had it. He's not afraid to say what others won't. Read his latest review in the Chicago Tribune. The article had been framed and hung in his apartment, right next to his vision board filled with the faces of comedy legends he aspired to surpass. But behind Jake's rising fame lurked a dangerous cocktail of insecurity and unbridled ambition. The son of a failed stand-up who'd abandoned the family when Jake was 12, he carried a chip on his shoulder the size of Madison Square Garden. He wasn't content with gradual success or paying his dues like the comics before him. He wanted to explode into superstardom overnight, to prove to his absent father and everyone else that he was exceptional. "You need a viral moment," his manager Trent had told him over drinks at an exclusive rooftop bar in Manhattan. "Something that puts you on everyone's radar. This isn't the 90s anymore. Talent isn't enough. You need to be trending." Jake nodded, the ice in his whiskey clinking as his mind raced with possibilities. The idea took root, growing into an obsession that consumed his every waking moment. He started targeting bigger comedians in his sets, dismantling their acts with surgical precision. First, it was local headliners, then Comedy Central regulars. He'd research their material, find the weaknesses, and exploit them mercilessly on stage. Each time, the clips would circulate on social media, earning him followers and a reputation as comedy's newest bad boy. The comment sections filled with fire emojis and savage reactions that Jake would scroll through late into the night, feeding his ego. "Did you see how many views that takedown of Mike Chen got?" Jake bragged to Trent over the phone. 2 million and counting. His fans are losing their minds." "That's great, Jake. But Chen is B-list at best," Trent replied, always pushing for more. "If you want to really break through, you need to aim higher." These small victories only fed his hunger for something bigger, something truly game-changing. The algorithm rewarded conflict. And Jake had become addicted to the rush of watching his numbers climb after each controversial set. In his apartment overlooking the city, Jake paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair as he contemplated his next move. He needed to take down someone untouchable, someone whose very name commanded respect across generations, someone whose fall would make headlines beyond the comedy world. "Steve Harvey is hosting that charity event next month," Trent mentioned casually during their weekly strategy meeting at an overpriced cafe where celebrities were often spotted. "All the industry execs will be there. Netflix, HBO, everyone. Could be a good networking opportunity." Jake's eyes lit up with dangerous ambition, a slow smile spreading across his face. Steve Harvey, Family Feud host, best-selling author, radio personality, and comedy legend. A man who transformed himself from stand-up comic to media empire. The perfect target. Taking down someone like Harvey wouldn't just get him views, it could catapult him straight to the A-list. "Get me on that lineup." Jake demanded, leaning forward with intensity. "Whatever it costs, whatever favors you need to call in. I need to be on that stage." "You sure about this?" Trent asked, raising an eyebrow. "Harvey's got serious pull in this industry. This isn't like roasting some mid-tier comic." "That's exactly why it has to be him," Jake insisted, already mentally crafting the perfect takedown. "Go big or go home, right? This is my shot." As Trent made the calls and pulled the strings to secure his spot, Jake locked himself in his apartment for days, crafting the most devastating set of his career. The walls became covered with sticky notes. Harvey's career missteps, controversial statements, personal details that could be weaponized for laughs. Jake convinced himself this wasn't just about fame. It was about exposing hypocrisy, about proving that no one was beyond criticism. The justifications helped him sleep at night. But what this comedian didn't realize was that challenging Steve Harvey would be the biggest mistake of their career. A miscalculation that would cost him everything he'd worked for and reveal the one thing Jake Donovan feared most: that beneath the confident exterior was a talent not nearly big enough to fill the spotlight he so desperately craved. The Beacon Theater glowed against the Manhattan skyline, its marquee announcing "Comedy for a Cause" in bold letters. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as Hollywood elites, comedy legends, and industry power brokers mingled in the ornate lobby. This wasn't just any charity event. It was the comedy fundraiser of the year, raising millions for children's education. Jake Donovan stood in the green room, peering through the crack in the door at the arriving celebrities. His palms were sweaty, but his resolve remained unshaken. Tonight was his moment. "You're on after the opening acts, right before Harvey introduces the main lineup," Trent reminded him, scrolling through his phone. 5 minutes, that's it. Make them count." "5 minutes is all I need," Jake replied, his voice eerily calm. He'd rehearsed his set until every pause, every inflection, was perfect. A precision-guided missile aimed at Steve Harvey's carefully constructed public image. Backstage, Jake paced as the first two comedians performed. Their safe, crowd-pleasing jokes earned polite laughter. He sneered. Playing it safe never changed history. "Harvey's in his dressing room," Trent whispered, returning from a reconnaissance mission. "He's got no idea what's coming." Jake nodded, adjusting his blazer in a mirror. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome to the stage the rising star of comedy, Jake Donovan." The spotlight hit his face as he strode onto the stage with practiced confidence. The audience applauded courteously. Most had no idea who he was. Yet. Thank you," Jake said, gripping the microphone. "It's an honor to be here tonight, supporting such an important cause." His eyes scanned the crowd, locating the table where Harvey would be seated after his introduction. Perfect. Jake launched into his set with a few harmless jokes about New York traffic and dating apps, establishing rapport, getting the audience comfortable. They laughed easily, warming to his charismatic delivery. Then, exactly 3 minutes in, he pivoted. "You know, I grew up watching comedy legends who talked about real life. Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, guys who weren't afraid to be authentic," Jake said, his tone shifting subtly. Not like some of today's personalities who've traded their edge for game show suits and family-friendly platitudes. A ripple of uncertain murmurs spread through the audience. Someone at a front table shifted uncomfortably. "Speaking of which, I hear Steve Harvey's here tonight," Jake continued, his voice dripping with mock admiration. The man who wrote a relationship advice book while on his third marriage. Now that takes confidence. The laughter became nervous, scattered. From the corner of his eye, Jake spotted movement backstage. Someone was watching. Good. He pressed on, launching into his meticulously crafted takedown, each joke more pointed than the last. He dissected Harvey's career moves, his public statements, his carefully constructed image as a moral authority. The thing about Steve Harvey, Jake said, building to his crescendo, is that he's mastered the art of failing upward. The man's made a career out of looking disappointed at game show contestants when his own life choices. Suddenly, the stage door opened. A tall, imposing figure stepped into the light. Steve Harvey himself walked onto the stage. The audience gasped collectively. This wasn't part of the program. Harvey wasn't supposed to appear until after Jake's set. But here he was, immaculately dressed in one of his signature suits, his expression unreadable. Jake faltered mid-sentence, his carefully memorized routine evaporating from his mind. The microphone suddenly felt slippery in his grasp. Harvey didn't reach for the microphone. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded the entire theater. He simply stood there, looking directly at Jake with eyes that had seen every kind of hustle, every form of disrespect, every shortcut to fame attempted in his decades-long career. The silence that fell over the Beacon Theater was deafening. And in that moment, Jake Donovan realized he had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. 3,000 people held their breath as Steve Harvey stood center stage, the spotlight casting dramatic shadows across his face. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity. The tension so thick it seemed to press against the ornate ceiling of the Beacon Theater. Jake's heartbeat thundered in his ears. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Harvey was meant to hear about the takedown afterward, maybe respond on social media, creating the perfect storm of viral content. Direct confrontation wasn't part of the plan. Finally, Harvey reached for the second microphone. "Son," he said, his deep voice resonating through the theater without a hint of anger, "may I have a moment of your time?" The audience shifted forward in their seats. Phones emerged to capture what was happening, despite the event's strict no-recording policy. This was too historic to miss. Jake nodded stiffly, trying to maintain his cocky demeanor while his mind raced for a way to regain control of the situation. "First of all," Harvey continued, "I want to thank you for being here tonight to support these kids' education programs." He gestured toward the charity logos displayed on the screen behind them. "That's what tonight is really about." A smattering of applause broke out, quickly growing louder. Harvey raised his hand, quieting the room again. "Now, young man, I've been in this business for over 35 years. Started in clubs so small the audience could reach out and touch me from their seats. Slept in my car between gigs. Bombed more times than I can count." Harvey paced slowly, his presence filling the stage. "So believe me when I tell you, I've heard every criticism, every joke at my expense, every attempt to tear me down." Jake swallowed hard, the confidence draining from his posture with each word Harvey spoke. "But here's something they don't teach you when you're coming up in comedy," Harvey continued, his voice taking on the cadence of the preacher's son he was. "There's a difference between being fearless and being foolish, between speaking truth to power and trying to build yourself up by tearing others down." The audience murmured in agreement. In the front row, several comedy legends nodded solemnly. "You've got talent," Harvey said, surprising everyone, including Jake. "I can see that. Your timing, your delivery, there's something there. But talent without wisdom is like a car with no steering wheel. All power, no direction. You'll crash eventually. Jake's prepared comebacks died in his throat. This wasn't the angry reaction he'd hoped to provoke. This was something far more devastating. Compassion mixed with disappointment. "I could stand here and respond to each of your jokes," Harvey said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I could tell you about how my failures in marriages taught me the lessons I share in my books. I could defend every career choice you mocked. But instead, I'm going to give you something more valuable." Harvey stepped closer to Jake, lowering his voice slightly, though the microphone still carried every word. "I'm going to give you the advice I wish someone had given me at your age. Your legacy isn't built on who you can knock down. It's built on who you can lift up." The audience erupted in applause. Someone in the balcony stood, then another, until the entire theater was on its feet. All except the industry executives at the VIP tables, who watched Jake with cool, evaluating eyes. "Now," Harvey said as the applause died down, "we've got children counting on us tonight. So I'm going to ask you to make a choice right now, in front of all these witnesses to your journey. Are you here to destroy, or are you here to create? Because only one of those paths leads to greatness." He extended his hand toward Jake, offering both reconciliation and challenge in a single gesture. The spotlight seemed to burn hotter on Jake's face as he stood frozen, the carefully constructed persona he'd created crumbling under Harvey's wisdom. In this unscripted moment, with cameras capturing every second, Jake Donovan faced the most important decision of his career. What happened next would either salvage his future or destroy it completely. Jake stared at Steve Harvey's outstretched hand, time seeming to slow around him. In the balcony, someone coughed. A camera flashed despite the prohibition. The air conditioning hummed beneath the weight of 3,000 people waiting for his response. This was the crossroads. Not the one Jake had imagined when plotting his rise to fame, but perhaps the one he needed. In that crystallized moment, memories flashed through his mind. His father walking out after another failed comedy gig, teenage Jake watching Harvey on TV, secretly admiring his success, the countless open mics where he'd been ignored. The first time a mean-spirited joke got more laughs than his clever ones. The addictive rush of social media validation. Jake looked past Harvey to the audience. In the front row sat Trent, his manager, frantically making a slashing motion across his throat, urging Jake to double down, to create the controversy they'd planned. Several rows back, Jake spotted a young boy wearing a charity t-shirt, eyes wide with confusion at the adult's tension. Something shifted inside him. Slowly, Jake reached out and took Harvey's hand. The audience exhaled, collectively, then erupted in applause. Harvey pulled him into a brief, firm embrace before stepping back to the microphone. "Growth happens in public sometimes," Harvey said, addressing the crowd. "We just witnessed something powerful here tonight. Let's give this young man some grace as he finds his path." Jake stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He cleared his throat. "I came here tonight with the wrong intentions. I thought tearing down a legend would make me one." His voice grew steadier as he continued. "I've spent so long trying to get noticed that I forgot what I actually wanted to say with comedy in the first place." From the corner of his eye, Jake saw Trent stand up and walk briskly toward the exit, phone already at his ear. There would be consequences for this deviation from their plan. "To Mr. Harvey and everyone here tonight, I apologize. And to make amends, I'd like to donate my fee for tonight's performance back to the education fund." The applause was polite but reserved. The audience wasn't quite ready to forgive completely. Jake nodded in understanding and handed the microphone back to Harvey. "Now that's how you turn a moment around," Harvey said warmly. "Let's continue with our program. Please welcome our next performer." Jake walked off stage on unsteady legs, the spotlight finally releasing him from its glare. Backstage was chaos. Production assistants whispering urgently into headsets, celebrities who had been waiting in the wings staring at him with mixed expressions of disdain and curiosity. He found a quiet corner and pulled out his phone. Social media was already exploding. Video clips had somehow leaked despite the no recording policy. The hashtags #DeBestidrast Jake and Steve and thus our comedy showdown were trending. His notifications were flooding in faster than he could process. Some called him a coward for backing down. Others praised his humility. Many were discovering him for the first time through this controversy. His follower count was skyrocketing, even as his career trajectory remained uncertain. A text from Trent appeared. "Meeting canceled with Netflix. Call me when you're ready to fix this mess." Then another message from an unknown number. "Good choice tonight, kid. Not many would have had the courage. Let's talk when you're ready. SH." Jake leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, the constant buzz of anxiety about his career had quieted. He'd come to the Beacon Theater expecting to sacrifice someone else's dignity for his ambition. Instead, he'd found something he didn't know he was missing: his integrity. Outside, the charity event continued. Inside, Jake Donovan began the process of reinventing himself. Not as comedy's bad boy, but as something far more challenging. A man willing to grow in public. The path ahead would be harder than the shortcut he'd planned. But as he pocketed his phone and prepared to face whatever came next, Jake felt something unexpected: relief. The morning after the Beacon Theater incident, Jake woke to a reality he barely recognized. His phone had died overnight from the constant stream of notifications. When he finally plugged it in and watched it flicker back to life, the magnitude of what had happened hit him all at once. Jake and Steve was the #1 trending topic nationally. Video clips from multiple angles had spread across every platform despite the event's recording ban. Morning shows were dissecting the confrontation frame by frame. Think pieces with titles like "The Moment Comedy Changed" and "Harvey vs. Donovan. Mentorship or Public Humiliation?" dominated entertainment news. Jake's apartment buzzer rang incessantly. Reporters and paparazzi had somehow found his address. He peeked through the blinds to see a small crowd gathered on the sidewalk below, cameras ready. A woman from Entertainment Tonight was doing a live stand-up directly beneath his window. Two bloggers he recognized from comedy podcasts were debating animatedly near the building entrance. "This is insane," he muttered, stepping away from the window. His studio apartment suddenly felt like a cage. Empty takeout containers and discarded clothing, evidence of the frantic preparation for last night's performance, were scattered across the floor. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years desperately seeking attention, and now that he had it, his first instinct was to hide. 3 missed calls from Trent had red exclamation marks beside them. Jake hesitated, then pressed call back, bracing himself for the conversation. Finally, Trent answered, skipping any greeting. His voice carried the sharp edge of someone who hadn't slept. "We need to meet. Now. Damage control is already behind schedule." "I'm not sure I can even leave my building," Jake replied, glancing again at the reporters outside. "It's a circus down there. Back entrance. Car waiting. 20 minutes. Trent hung up before Jake could respond. Jake quickly showered, trying to wash away the previous night's humiliation along with the nervous sweat. As the water ran over him, he replayed Harvey's words again and again. Your legacy isn't built on who you can knock down. It's built on who you can lift up. The simplicity and truth of it stung worse than any insult Harvey could have hurled at him. Dressed in jeans and a hoodie pulled low over his face, Jake slipped out through the service entrance. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, just as Trent had promised. He dove into the back seat before anyone could recognize him. 90 minutes later, they sat in a private room at 11 Madison Park, an upscale restaurant known for its discretion with celebrity clients. The maitre d' had escorted them through a separate entrance, away from curious eyes. Trent had barely touched his espresso, too busy scrolling through his tablet and occasionally turning it to show Jake various headlines and social media metrics. The good news, Trent said, is that you're famous, like actually famous now. Not comedy circuit famous, mainstream famous. He flipped his tablet around to show Jake his social media numbers. You've gained 300,000 followers since last night. Your clips from previous shows are being watched millions of times. People who never heard of you yesterday are declaring themselves longtime fans today. And the bad news? Jake asked, already knowing the answer. Your brand is completely confused. Half the industry thinks you're a calculating provocateur who chickened out. The other half thinks you're having some kind of public redemption arc. Trent set down his tablet with a sharp click against the marble table. We need to pick a lane, and fast. The morning shows are calling. Podcast invitations are flooding in. Jimmy Fallon's people reached out about a possible segment. What about just being myself for a while? Jake suggested, picking at the untouched avocado toast on his plate. Trent stared at him, as if he'd suggested performing comedy in Latin. That's not how this works. The algorithm rewards consistency. People need to know what they're getting with Jake Donovan. Are you the edgy truth teller who goes after sacred cows? Or are you the humble young comic learning life lessons from his elders? We can sell either, but not both. Maybe that's been the problem all along, Jake said quietly. I'm not sure I've known what they're getting either. Trent leaned forward, lowering his voice despite the private room. Look, I get that last night didn't go as planned, but we can still work with this. The narrative is actually better now, more complex, more human. We just need to control it before someone else does. Their conversation was interrupted by Trent's phone ringing with the specialized tone he used for important industry contacts. He glanced at the screen and his eyes widened. I need to take this, he said, stepping away from the table and into the restaurant's corridor. Jake sat alone, stirring his untouched coffee. On a nearby television, muted but visible, a daytime talk show was showing the footage from last night. The camera zoomed in on his face as he took Harvey's hand. Jake barely recognized himself. The vulnerability, the authenticity of that moment was so different from the calculated persona he'd cultivated over the past few years. A waiter silently refilled his water glass, pretending not to recognize him. Jake nodded in thanks, wondering if this strange new visibility would become his normal now. Trent returned, his expression a mixture of disbelief and calculation. He sat down slowly, as if the chair might collapse under the weight of what he was about to say. That was Good Morning America, he said, his voice hushed with significance. They want you and Harvey. Together. Tomorrow morning. Prime slot, extended segment. What? Why would Harvey agree to that? Jake set down his coffee cup too, quickly, spilling some onto the pristine tablecloth. Apparently, he already has. Trent leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the possibilities. This is it, Jake. The viral moment we wanted, just different. If you play this right, you could come out of this with something bigger than we planned. The redemption angle could actually work in your favor. America loves a good transformation story. Jake stared into his coffee, seeing his distorted reflection in the dark liquid. And if I play it wrong? Then this 15 minutes ends tomorrow, and you go back to clubs in Wisconsin. Trent checked his watch, already moving on to logistics. We need to prep. They'll send a car at 5 a.m. I'll have talking points drafted within the hour. As they left the restaurant through the kitchen to avoid photographers, Jake felt his phone vibrate with a text. It was from the same unknown number as last night, Steve Harvey. Before tomorrow's interview, let's talk. Just us. My hotel, 8 p.m., room 1214. Jake stopped walking, causing Trent to turn around questioningly. Everything okay? Trent asked, already scanning his own phone for the next crisis to manage. Jake pocketed his phone. Yeah, just need to make a stop tonight. Make it quick. We need to rehearse your responses. This GMA appearance needs to be perfect. Trent was already dialing another call as they reached the SUV. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Trent brought in a crisis PR specialist who coached Jake on how to appear contrite without seeming weak. A stylist arrived with options for the television appearance. Nothing too polished, but nothing too casual either. The goal was authentic but camera-ready, whatever that meant. Jake nodded through it all, but his mind kept drifting to the upcoming meeting with Harvey. What could the man possibly want to say that he hadn't already said on stage? Was this another public lesson, or something else entirely? At precisely 8 p.m., Jake found himself in the presidential suite of the Four Seasons, sitting across from Steve Harvey. No cameras, no audience, no managers. Just two comedians from different generations at different points in their journeys. The suite was impressive without being ostentatious, much like Harvey himself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park and the glittering Manhattan skyline beyond. Harvey had changed from his signature suit into more casual attire. Designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Jake's monthly rent. You know why I came on stage last night? Harvey asked, pouring Jake a glass of water from a crystal decanter. Jake shook his head, accepting the glass with slightly trembling hands. Because 30 years ago, I was you. Harvey settled back in his chair, the leather creaking softly beneath his weight. Different circumstances, different target, but the same hunger. The same willingness to step on someone else to climb higher. What happened? Jake asked, genuinely curious. Someone I respected gave me a choice. Not in public like I did to you. I got lucky that way. Harvey's expression grew reflective, the lines around his eyes deepening with memory. Richard Pryor. I was opening for him in Chicago, trying to make a name for myself. Had this bit about another comedian, someone established. Thought tearing him down would make me look clever. Jake leaned forward, captivated. This wasn't a story he'd ever heard in any Harvey interview. Pryor caught my act the night before I was supposed to perform it at the main show. Called me to his dressing room afterward. Harvey chuckled softly. I thought he was going to praise me, tell me how brilliant I was. Instead, he told me I was better than that material. Said I had real talent, but I was wasting it trying to climb over someone else instead of building my own ladder. Harvey paused, taking a sip of his own water. He told me I could be a flash in the pan with a career built on destruction, or I could be a builder. Said the first path might get me on stage, but the second would keep me there for decades. Jake nodded slowly, understanding dawning. So last night, You were passing on what Pryor gave you. Exactly. Harvey leaned forward, his gaze intense. Comedy's hard enough without us tearing each other down. The audience will do plenty of that for free. I didn't expect you to be so gracious about it, Jake admitted. I was trying to humiliate you. I know, Harvey said simply. The question is why? What were you really after? Jake stared out at the city lights, searching for an answer that didn't sound pathetic. Attention, I guess. Recognition. I thought if I could take down someone at your level, people would have to notice me. And now that they have, how's it feel? Honestly, terrifying. Jake laughed without humor. I've spent years imagining what fame would be like. Now that I've got a taste, I'm not sure I was ready for it. Harvey nodded knowingly. Tomorrow on GMA, they're going to try to create conflict between us. He continued, changing the subject slightly. Producers want drama. Viewers want tension. They're hoping one of us will snap or that I'll humiliate you like you tried to do to me. It makes for better television. What do you want? Jake asked, meeting the older comedian's gaze directly. Harvey smiled, the warmth reaching his eyes. I want to show them something they're not expecting. What it looks like when men choose growth over ego. When we decide that being right isn't as important as doing right. As the night deepened, the two comedians talked about craft, about failure, about the industry's evolution. Harvey shared stories Jake had never heard in any interview, about the lean years and the lessons learned. Jake found himself opening up about his absent father, his desperate need for validation, the hollowness he felt even when his career seemed to be gaining traction. Comedy saved my life, Jake admitted around midnight after they'd moved from water to coffee. But lately, I've been wondering if I've been using it wrong. Like having a life-saving medicine but taking it for a high instead. Harvey nodded. The stage can be therapy or it can be a weapon. The choice is made every time you step into the spotlight. By the time they parted, Jake had a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The path forward wasn't about going viral or taking shortcuts. It wasn't even about tomorrow's television appearance. It was about the much harder, much longer road of becoming not just a successful comedian, but a man he could respect when he looked in the mirror. When Jake returned to his apartment, he found 17 messages from Trent, each more frantic than the last. He sent a simple reply. I'm good. See you tomorrow. Then he turned off his phone and slept better than he had in months. The next morning, as the Good Morning America countdown began, Jake and Harvey stood side by side backstage. The producers had briefed them on the angle they wanted. Tension, possible reconciliation, dramatic moments for the highlight reel. The female anchor had whispered to Jake that she was on his side, while her male counterpart had given Harvey a conspiratorial nod. The green room buzzed with the nervous energy of production assistants, makeup artists making last-minute touch-ups, and Trent pacing anxiously in the corner, still frustrated that Jake had ignored his carefully crafted talking points. Ready? Harvey asked quietly, as the floor director signaled 1 minute to air. Jake took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. Ready to try something different? That's all we can ever do, Harvey replied with a gentle clap on Jake's shoulder. The lights came up, the hosts introduced them with dramatic flair, and the two men walked out together to tell a story that neither the producers nor the audience were expecting. A story not about conflict, but about comedy, mentorship, and the courage to change course in public. As the cameras rolled and millions watched from home, Jake Donovan began the next chapter of his career. Not as the comedian who tried to take down Steve Harvey, but as the man who learned that true success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by who you bring along with you.